What happens when Hollywood's most elusive star walks into a studio expecting redemption only to walk straight into an ambush? What began as a routine promotional interview spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable, unfiltered, and unforgettable moments in daytime TV history. This is the story of Johnny Depp's explosive appearance on The View and how a simple conversation turned into a public takedown, with security called in to defuse the fallout. Before we dive into the chaos, make sure to hit subscribe and drop a comment below. What do you think really happened behind the scenes? The morning began like any other at The View's New York studios. Johnny Depp had flown in for one reason: to talk about his passion project in independent film that marked his return to serious, soul-driven storytelling. After years of legal drama, tabloid frenzy, and endless speculation, this was supposed to be his moment of peace, a chance to speak as himself. His team had handpicked The View for a reason. They wanted conversation, not confrontation. They chose wrong. Backstage, Whoopi Goldberg was already in what her staff quietly referred to as one of her off days. She arrived tense, short with crew, visibly irritated. Makeup artists were snapped at, producers were brushed off. Something was simmering then. Everyone knew it. Some whispered about bad press from a recent flop. Others hinted at tension with the network, but no one expected what would unfold on air. Meanwhile, Johnny was being Johnny, charming the staff, laughing with the co-hosts. Joy Behar called him one of the most gracious guests we've ever had. Sunny Hostin, typically reserved, couldn't help but smile at his stories. Even Sarah N. remarked later how he'd complimented her jewelry and asked thoughtful questions about her kids, but Whoopi, she stayed distant, quiet, focused. And according to one producer, you could feel the storm coming. The show opened smoothly, usual chatter, headlines, light sparring between co-hosts. But if you were watching closely, Whoopi was off at comments, steamrolling her co-hosts, visibly impatient. Then came the moment. Please welcome Johnny Depp. The audience erupted. Johnny walked out, all laid-back elegance, black blazer, vintage tee, signature rings catching the light, hair pulled back casually. He took his seat, flashed that familiar half-smile, and leaned into the conversation. "Thank you for having me," he said warmly. "It's a privilege to be here with people who aren't afraid to ask hard questions." That's when the first crack appeared. Whoopi's eyebrow twitched, just slightly, but it began, as it always does, innocently. Sarah asked about the new film, what drew him in. He spoke of redemption, resilience, how the character mirrored pieces of his own journey trying to rebuild after being shattered. The words were vulnerable, real, and the audience felt it. Sunny leaned in. "Was that personal for you?" She asked, "Did this role reflect something you've lived through?" Johnny nodded. "I think anyone who's ever had the world tell them who they are then had to fight to take that back. It's about finding who you really are again." After the noise, the room was still. This was the Depp people remembered. The artist, the soul, the man behind the myth. And then, Whoopi spoke. Her voice cut through the studio like a cold blade. "That's a very convenient narrative," she said. "But let's talk about what really happened. During your very public legal battles, the air was sucked out of the room. Do you really expect us to believe," she continued, her tone growing sharper, "that you're the victim in all of this?" The other hosts froze. This wasn't pre-approved. This wasn't even remotely in the rundown. The control room lit up, producers scrambling, unsure whether to cut or let it roll. Johnny didn't flinch, but his smile faded. "I think the legal proceedings spoke for themselves," he said calmly. "And I think it's dangerous when people use platforms like this to relitigate something that's already been decided." Whoopi leaned forward. "It's not dangerous, Johnny. It's honest. The world saw the footage, heard the recordings. Not everyone believes the version of events you're selling now." Gasps, murmurs. Joy Behar's eyes darted across the table, silently pleading to move on. Sarah glanced at the producers, panic in her eyes. But Whoopi was locked in, and Johnny knew it. "This isn't about belief," he replied, measured but firm. "It's about truth. And truth doesn't become less true just because it makes people uncomfortable." Whoopi scoffed. "Or maybe it just makes you uncomfortable when people stop letting you control the narrative." That did it. Johnny leaned forward, eyes steady, voice suddenly devoid of charm. With all due respect, Whoopi, this doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like a public execution dressed up as journalism. And if that's what we're doing here, then just say it. The silence was deafening. Producer's signal cut to break. Now, but it was too late. Whoopi fired back. You want sympathy? You want forgiveness, but you don't want accountability. And you certainly don't want a woman calling you out. Well, guess what, Johnny? We don't hand out redemption here just because you showed up with a script and a smile. Depp stood up slowly. You're not calling me out, he said quietly. You're projecting. And you're using me to settle a score that has nothing to do with this conversation. So if we're done pretending this is about a movie, I'll show myself out. Security had already begun moving. His publicist rushed forward. Joy, shouted Johnny, please, wait. But he was already walking, and as he reached the edge of the stage, he paused, turned back and spoke one final line. You want to talk about accountability, Whoopi? Start with yourself. That was the moment the feed cut. The studio never aired the rest. But the clip, it went viral. Within the hour, people picked sides, debates exploded. Was it justice? Or character assassination? A bold interview? Or a betrayal disguised as journalism? All we know is Johnny Depp came looking for redemption. What he got was war. And it all happened live. Depp's voice was steady, controlled, but there was fire flickering just beneath the surface. Whoopi, I came here today to talk about my work, about a film I care deeply about. That's it. But Whoopi wasn't interested in the work. She leaned forward, her tone sharpened to a blade. But your work and your life aren't separate, are they? Your choices, the chaos, they didn't just affect you. They hurt people. Your co-stars, your crew, your family. There were you. Justify that? The studio fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Even the audience, usually eager to cheer or laugh, didn't make a sound. You could feel it, the tension pressing down on the room like a storm about to break. Joy tried to cut in something light, something safe, but Whoopi silenced her with a raised hand. Johnny inhaled slowly. I've never claimed to be perfect, he said. I've taken responsibility for my mistakes, but I will not sit here and be ambushed with accusations that have already been addressed and settled in a court of law. Whoopi let out a humorless laugh, sharp and biting. Ambushed? No, Johnny. This is called accountability, something you clearly struggle with. You want to sell your redemption arc, but you refuse to confront the wreckage you left behind. I've faced plenty of hard questions, Johnny snapped back, voice still even, but eyes now burning. What I won't do is participate in a public character assassination, dressed up as journalism. You could see the shift happen. Sarah and Sunny exchanged nervous glances. Joy looked down at her note cards like they might offer an escape. In the control room, panic erupted, cut to break or let it burn. But Whoopi was locked in now. Character assassination? She repeated, her voice rising. You did that to yourself. You want understanding. You want sympathy. Then start by being honest about the damage you caused. Johnny leaned forward, his composure cracking for the first time. The only damage I see right now is what you're doing to this interview. I came here in good faith to talk about something that means everything to me. And instead, you've twisted this into a personal attack. A vendetta. Vendetta, Whoopi scoffed. I don't know you, Johnny Depp. Not personally. But I do know your behavior had consequences. Real people were hurt, and they deserve better than your rehearsed PR monologue. The other hosts were visibly shaken, no Joy silently mouthing. To the producers for help, Sarah, with her hand half raised, like she might say something, then thought better of it. But Johnny didn't back down. You want to talk about the people I've affected? Fine. What about the ones who stood by me? The ones who believed in me? The ones who saw through the smear campaign and never stopped believing in the truth? Does that matter to you, Whoopi? Or are you only here to tear people down? Then came the moment that shifted the entire room. Whoopi slammed her hand on the table hard. The audience jumped. Some gasped. Even the cameras seemed to freeze. Do not lecture me about truth, she growled. I've been in this business longer than you've been famous. I know a performance when I see one. And right now, that's exactly what I'm watching. Another performance. Johnny stood, slowly, deliberately. His posture was straight, but the fury in his eyes said everything. We need to take a step back, he said, voice low and razor-sharp. "I came here with respect for this show and for you. But respect is a two-way street." Whoopi leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and offered a cold smirk. "Oh, now you want to talk about respect? That's rich coming from someone who's shown so little to the people closest to him." Joy made a last-ditch attempt. "To save the show, maybe we can pivot. Johnny, tell us about the director you worked with on this film," but Whoopi cut her off with a look that could freeze fire. "No, Joy, we're not moving on. I'm tired of celebrities coming on this show thinking they can dictate the narrative. This isn't a magazine puff piece. This is real life." Johnny sat back down, but everything about him had changed. His shoulders were coiled. His face was cold steel. "You know what, Whoopi? You're right about one thing. This isn't a puff piece. It's a hit job. A hit job." Whoopi let out a bitter laugh. "I'm asking you the kind of questions any real journalist would. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." Johnny locked eyes with her, his voice rising but not shaking. "You haven't asked a single question about my work. Nothing about my craft. Nothing about this film. From the moment I sat down, all you've done is try to tear me down. That's not journalism. That's bullying." That word landed like a grenade. Bullying. The audience sucked in a collective breath. Whoopi's eyes narrowed. Her smile disappeared. "Did you just call me a bully?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I'm not the one. With restraining orders, I'm not the one whose own security had to intervene. You're the one with the history, not me." Johnny's face went pale. The audience gasped audibly. Sunny Hostin looked ill. This was no longer uncomfortable television. This was a collapse in real time. "How dare you?" Johnny said, shaking. "Those allegations were proven false. You know that. Everyone knows that. And here you are, spreading lies on national television." "I'm stating facts," Whoopi fired back. "Court records don't lie. Your behavior is documented." And, just like that, the segment collapsed into chaos. Security was called. The interview was cut short. The broadcast faded out, but the clip, it would be played again and again across every platform. Because what unfolded that day on The View wasn't just a clash between actor and host, it was war-live, unfiltered, and impossible to forget. Whoopi leaned in, her tone icy but deliberate. "Your own text messages were read in open court. Should I quote a few for our audience?" The crowd shifted. Gasps, whispers. Then something unprecedented happened. Sarah N. stood up. No one on The View had ever done that during a live segment. This is spiraling out of control. But Whoopi didn't flinch. She turned toward Sarah, and the venom she'd been directing at Johnny instantly reloaded, this time for one of her own. "Sit down, Sarah," she snapped, loud enough to echo. "This is my show, and I will run it how I see fit. If you don't like it, you're welcome to leave too." Sunny just shook her head in disbelief, unable to hide her disgust. His anger gave way to something else, something protective. He leaned forward. "Do not speak to them like that," he said, steady and direct. "They're just doing their jobs. If you want to keep attacking someone, attack me. Leave them out of it." Oh, how noble the great Johnny Depp, defender of women. His voice cut through the air like a cleaver. "I've sat here and taken your abuse because I thought there might be something constructive to come from this conversation. But you're not interested in truth or accountability. You're not even interested in a decent conversation. You're interested in destruction. That's all this is. This is what real accountability looks like. When actions have consequences." Johnny's voice rose, his composure finally cracking. "And what about your actions? Right now? What about the way you're treating your own co-hosts, your audience? The people in this room who trusted you to act like a professional? That landed hard." Grudge Whoopi's voice rose to a near shout. "I don't need a grudge to call out manipulation. I don't need a grudge to recognize a celebrity who thinks fame is a free pass to hurt people. The only one hurting people right now is you," Johnny shot back. "Everyone sees what you're doing except you." And it was true. The studio was in stunned paralysis. Camera operators exchanged nervous glances. Producers whispered frantically into headsets. Even the audience was shrinking back in their seats, physically leaning away from the confrontation. Then Whoopi scanned the room, and for the first time, she realized she had lost them. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "You want to talk about making people uncomfortable?" she hissed. "I've called out liars and manipulators before you were even famous. But in sorrow, you know what's tragic, Whoopi?" he said, voice soft now. "The way you stood up to power when it mattered. But this isn't truth. This isn't courage. This is just cruelty." For just a second, Whoopi's mask slipped. Her eyes flickered, something unguarded flashing through. Then it was gone, replaced with hard stone. "Don't you dare lecture me about courage," she spat. "Don't you sit there and try to make me the villain in your redemption arc. I'm not the one who destroyed my career with bad choices. I'm not the one who needs to rehabilitate my image." Johnny didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "No," he said simply. "You're the one destroying your career right now, in real time, in front of millions of people. And the worst part is, you don't even see it. That silence. Deafening. Even Whoopi seemed stunned. The co-hosts were visibly shaken up, Joy pale with disbelief. Dead quiet Dot, and then with a cold, flat voice that chilled the room. "Get out," Whoopi said. Johnny blinked. The audience gasped again. Johnny looked. To the other hosts, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was absolute. "You're done here." The words sliced through the air like a final verdict. The audience gasped, loud, audible, and unrehearsed. You could feel the collective disbelief rippling through the studio. Joy was staring at Whoopi like she didn't recognize. The woman beside her, Sarah and Sunny, looked like they wanted to vanish into their seats. This wasn't just off. Scripted was historic, unprecedented, unforgivable. Unfolding live, Johnny looked around slowly, taking in the stunned faces. Crew, the hosts, the audience, frozen mid-breath. It was as if time itself had stopped to watch what he would do next. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, low, but resonant with something deeper. "Because I have too much respect for these ladies, and for the people watching, to drag this any further." He paused. The weight of the moment settled over the room. "But let's be clear. I came here today with an open heart. With respect for this show and the platform it offers. What happened here wasn't inevitable. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. A deliberate choice by one person to turn a conversation into a public ambush." He turned to Joy, Sarah, and Sunny. His voice softened. You could see the heartbreak behind his words. "Joy, Sarah, Sunny, I'm sorry you had to witness this. You're professionals. You didn't deserve any of it." Then he turned to Whoopi. Not with rage, but with clarity. His voice took on a quiet power, cutting through the air with surgical precision. "And Whoopi, I hope one day, whatever it is you're searching for, whatever peace you've been chasing, I hope you find it, because this is not it." And with that, Johnny turned and began walking toward the exit. But Whoopi wasn't done. Not yet. Not ever. She called after him, her voice echoing off the walls. "That's right, walk away. Just like you always do when things get hard. Just like you did when your marriage fell apart. When your reputation crumbled. Walk away and play the victim." Johnny stopped, dead in his tracks. The entire room held its breath. Would he turn around? Would he respond? Even the cameras hesitated. But, after a moment, he simply drew a breath-deep, controlled and kept walking. That silence. It said more than any comeback ever could. The restraint, the composure, the sheer refusal to sink to her level, it made her final attack feel desperate. Petty Dot, and then, in a moment that sealed the spectacle into broadcast infamy, Whoopi reached for her mic. "Security!" she barked. "Please escort Mr. Depp from the building." The irony was a sledgehammer. Johnny was already leaving. On his own, head held high. Dignity intact. But she needed to frame it, needed the optics of control. 2 security guards appeared, visibly uncomfortable, exchanging glances as they approached him. One of them spoke quietly. "Sir, we need to ask you to leave the premises." Johnny offered a gracious nod. "Of course, I understand. You're just doing your job." And as he disappeared off stage, the show faded not into applause, but into stunned, aching silence. He turned to the security guard with a faint, wry smile. "I've been escorted out of better places than this." The line landed perfectly dry, sharp, and impossibly composed. A ripple of uneasy laughter broke through the tension. Even Some of the crew couldn't suppress their smirks. Johnny Depp still had his timing and his dignity. As the guards flanked him more out of protocol than needy, he walked calmly toward the exit. But just before reaching the door, he paused, turned back, and addressed the stunned audience directly. Cameras still rolling, red lights blinking, history being made. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. I'm sorry things unfolded this way, but sometimes, truthfully, this is what happens when art meets ego. He looked toward the camera with quiet sincerity. I hope you'll still consider watching the film. A lot of good people poured their hearts into it. They don't deserve to have their work overshadowed by all this. Even in his final moments on set, Johnny was protecting his cast, crew, everyone but himself. The contrast between his professionalism and Whoopi's aggression was now unmistakable. From behind the desk, Whoopi snapped, "Get him out of here!" But her voice had lost its fire. It rang shrill, brittle. The room was no longer with her. As Johnny disappeared behind the studio doors, a profound silence settled. Not relief, not closure, just fallout. Joy sat frozen, visibly shaken. Sarah's jaw was clenched, her glare aimed straight at Whoopi. Sunny said nothing. Her silence said everything. Audience members whispered to each other in disbelief. Crew exchanged shell-shocked looks. In the control room, producers were already debating how much of the footage could even air. This wasn't just bad optics, this was a full-blown network crisis. Then came the moment that sealed it. Whoopi glanced around the room, only now beginning to register what she'd done. But instead of backing down, she forced one last tone-deaf declaration. That's what happens when someone thinks they can come on this show and manipulate the narrative. We ask the hard questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be here. But the words fell flat. The conviction was gone. All that remained was a defensive shell of what had once been righteous fury. The air had changed. The magic of live television had evaporated, replaced by something cold and irreversible. Finally, Joy spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think we need to go to commercial." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes heavy. "We'll be right back." As the red lights dimmed and the feed cut, the room erupted not in chaos, but in quiet disarray. Whispers, headshakes, walkouts. Crew hosts turned away from Whoopi. Crew members looked anywhere but at her. Audience members got up to leave. The control room phones were ringing off the hook. Damage control was already underway. Clips from the confrontation were already hitting social media out of context. In context, didn't matter. The court of public opinion had been summoned, and the trial had begun. But the most telling moment came quietly, as the chaos buzzed. Around her, Whoopi sat alone at the desk. The woman who had commanded the stage for decades now looked small, shrunk by the weight of a moment she could no longer control. A production assistant approached gently, "Ms. Goldberg, the producers would like to speak with you." She didn't look up, just stared ahead, unfocused. "I was just doing my job," she whispered, but no one responded. The assistant nodded politely and walked away, leaving Whoopi with only the consequences. Around her, the show carried on technically, but something fundamental had broken. The trust, the respect, the invisible agreement between guest and host. Gone, meanwhile. Down a hallway flooded with fluorescent light, Johnny Depp walked beside the security guards, both of whom looked visibly uncomfortable. One of them spoke softly. "Mr. Depp, I just want to say, I'm sorry about what happened in there. That wasn't right." Johnny paused. "Thank you," he replied. "That means more than you know." And then the doors opened. Outside, a small crowd of fans had gathered completely unaware of what had just transpired inside. When they saw him, they erupted in cheers. Johnny smiled, not broadly, not triumphantly, just enough to show that he was still standing. He waved, climbed into the waiting car, and as the vehicle pulled away from the curb, he looked back one last time at the studio that had turned into a battlefield. Not with bitterness, not even anger, just clarity. What happened that day would ripple across social media, dominate headlines, and set off a firestorm of commentary from every corner of the entertainment world. Clips of the confrontation would rack up millions of views. Media outlets would debate. Whoopi's behavior PR firms would scramble. But one thing was clear. Johnny Depp had walked into a storm, and walked out with his integrity intact. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do in the face of cruelty isn't to fight back, it's to stand tall, speak truth, and walk away. What do you think really drove Whoopi Goldberg to go off script that day? Was it personal, political, or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. For more raw, revealing moments from the world of entertainment where truth is always stranger than fiction.